The next thing we want to talk about is how people make the external world fit their internal belief system or script. Since the script is a survival program, it's a way that the child has learned to survive, people will work very hard to try to justify the need for doing that because that's the way they have learned to keep themselves safe and take care of themselves. And Jackie Schiff talked about what she called frames of reference, which is another way of talking about scripts. Frames of reference basically are a way to justify our life script and keep our world consistent and predictable. They are maintained through what's called discounting, redefining, and tangential and blocking transactions. Discounting is minimizing, deleting, or distorting information that's relevant to solve the problem. Redefining is talking about responding in a way that is related to what you've just said, but basically slightly changes the definition of what you're talking about. Tangential and blocking transactions are what you see on the surface. Redefining is an internal process, so you can't really see it going on, but what you see is evidence of when somebody is redefining are what are called tangential and blocking transactions. If you want to get a good sense of what tangential transactions are like, watch a politician being interviewed. You know, somebody will ask a question and they respond with something that's vaguely related, but it's really answering the question they want to answer rather than the question that was just asked. And after 2 or 3 of these, you begin shaking your head and wonder, what's wrong with you, because you start feeling crazy. Blocking transactions are a way, as Felipe was talking about earlier, to kind of stop the conversation. For example, somebody might say, "What are you feeling?" Instead of answering the question, I might say, "Emotionally or physically?" Or in the example Felipe gave earlier, a child asking a question and or somebody asking a question and the mother saying, "We don't talk about that here." So rather than responding, they're blocking the conversation. Jackie pointed out how all of us are born as a natural child, and we learn in growing up in our families to adapt our behaviors in ways that we get along with parents and other authority figures. We develop an adult ego state to figure out options for doing all of that, and then we internalize a parent that has certain values and belief systems and so forth, and all of that provides a frame of reference for making sense out of the world. And people will then make a decision about how best to be in the world. And it's really coming from the natural child in terms of how do I go about surviving around here. For example, the person may decide the thing to do is to stay in my parent ego state and just make sure I can control everything that's happening every moment. Or another person might decide the best thing to do is to deal with the facts, only the facts, nothing but the facts, not express any strong opinions or values or emotions. Other people might decide the best way to survive is to be in a compliant child position or in a rebellious child position. So people will make decisions about how best to try to take care of themselves. And that frame of reference becomes a life script. And when we're dealing with someone else who has a similar structure, but has their own unique frame of reference based on their own history, and also has made a decision about how to best operate in the world. For example, I might have decided the best way to take care of myself and stay safe is to be a very compliant child. And I may find somebody who has decided to be a parent and form a symbiotic relationship in which I try to get them to take care of me. And I do all the feeling and acting out of behaviors. So each of us will have our own unique frame of reference, and often people will say something, one person from their frame of reference, the other person might redefine what they're talking about and respond with something that's vaguely related, but is really tangential. Like one person might say, I think it's important to be autonomous. The other person might say, well, why would you want to be so selfish? Well, they're using the same word, but they have two totally different frames of reference and definitions of what autonomy means. One person means making your own choices. The other person means acting out without regard to anybody else. So a lot of arguments go on because people don't stop and define their frame of reference and the definition of the words that they're using. And it's like arguing apples and oranges. The arguments can go on and on and on, and they're really talking about, the two people are talking about totally different things. And a useful way to get out of that is to stop and really define what they mean by the terms that they're using. When people drop their frame of reference and they transact directly natural child to natural child, that's what intimacy is all about. So I want to just give you an example of a frame of reference issue and how we attempt to maintain that frame of reference in order to keep ourselves safe. If I grew up in a family where I was abused or abused by other folks outside the family, as Graham was talking about, the service station attendant, I may conclude that the world is a dangerous place. And, I can't trust because people are really out to get you. And if I believe that, I'm going to go around looking for examples in order to try to justify that. And I will often discount, that is, minimize, delete, distort information that's contrary to that. So if somebody does something nice, I may discount that and redefine it. Oh, I know what they're up to. They're just trying to sucker me in so they can get me. I got to watch out. The reason people will do that, again, is they've learned to stay safe by keeping their distance, not trusting, not getting close in order not to get hurt. And they believe that's necessary to continue in order to survive and keep themselves safe. So they often discount the information that's really out there that's different from their own script beliefs and redefine what's happening into something that has a different meaning. A couple of ways that people do that are by maintaining psychological rackets, which are particular unpleasant ways of feeling, and playing psychological games. So both of these involve how we use our transactions for ulterior purposes in order to support our script. And we want to talk in a little more depth about both rackets and games. I'll say a little bit about rackets, and then Felipe is going to talk about psychological games.
Can I just say that some of you may know that racket, we use the idea of substitution. So racket is the idea that is used in the theory traditionally, but it's where we substitute the feeling that's most comfortable for us, for those who may know it that way.
So I want to give you a definition of a racket. A racket basically is the process of seeking out and maintaining an unfamiliar, pleasant feeling as a way of manipulating support from the environment. Yes?
Is that a sound metaphor, or is it like a racket as in like, organized crime racket? Like, what kind of metaphor are we using here?
Well, Byrne called it a racket. It came out of the whole idea of organized crime because
Okay.
it's a way of exploiting or ripping off strokes.
Got it, okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, it's a very good question.
And there's another part to it, that we talk about the sexualization also. There's a turn-on to that racket.
That's right. Byrne talked about how people really get off on having certain feelings. And these are the feelings that worked in childhood to get attention and to get the parents to try to help. For example, if I grew up in a family where if I was assertive, nobody paid attention, but if I got sad, everybody dropped everything and started attending to me, then I learned what to feel if I wanted mom and dad and other people's attention. So the rackets are the feelings that worked in our family of origin to get people to pay attention and try to help. Another definition is escalating a familiar, unpleasant feeling rather than taking direct action to resolve the feeling. For example, if somebody does something and I feel angry, and somebody asks me, well, what can you do about that? And I look at the options and I decide I don't want to do any of that, and I just escalate my anger, then that's a racket. And chances are I've learned I can get other people to try to solve it for me by maintaining that feeling. The purpose of all what we consider unpleasant feelings is to really let us know what we're needing. Anger, for example, lets me know somebody's invading my space in some inappropriate way, and I need to say, hold it, and set a limit. Sadness lets me know I need some love and nurturance, and it motivates me to reach out to get that. Scare lets me know I need some protection, safety, and it motivates me, again, to reach out to get that. Confusion lets me know I need information I don't have. Guilt lets me know I've wronged somebody and I need to make amends, and so on. So all what we consider negative feelings is a stimulus for problem solving. Whatever your preference is, these are feelings that we usually experience as bad in some way, or uncomfortable in some way, or difficult for us. So the process of problem solving looks like this. The first issue is to really identify what I'm feeling. If I'm angry, the first question is, what's going on that I feel angry about? What can I do about that? To look at my options. And the whole range of options, from doing nothing to killing somebody or whatever. And then fourth, I can choose an option in order to solve the problem. And I can then implement the option and let go of the feeling. Again, if instead of taking action to solve it, I simply escalate the feeling, then chances are I've learned that I can get support and problem solving from other people by doing that. And I can get a whole lot of attention from other folks. Rackets are the feelings that people go into in a situation of stress. You might think about people driving down a busy expressway. People with an anger racket have what's traditionally called road rage. They'll be shaking their fist, using obscene gestures and so forth towards other people. People with a fear racket will be very anxious about cutting in front of somebody. People with a confusion racket will lose their way 3 times between here and the corner drugstore, and so on. We have very clear instructions printed for how to get to our institute, which is out in a kind of retreat-like setting, a rural area. And it's always diagnostic in terms of who can find their way there and who can't. I mean, sometimes people call us 3 or 4 times before they actually get there. And it's obvious that they have a confusion racket. They are also learned through life situations. Little kid wants a cookie. Mommy says, you can't have a cookie. It's time for dinner. And the little kid says, but I want a cookie. And father says, if you don't shut up, I'm going to knock your head off. And the child gets very scared, backs off. Very interesting thing happens. Father sees him scared and said, oh, that's okay. And mother said, oh, you poor dear, here, have that cookie. So being assertive doesn't get you what you want, he learns. It's being scared. So the next time he wants a cookie, he figures out a way to be scared. So mother will reward him. Little kid comes home from school. He hit 3 home runs at the ball game. He made all A's on his report card. His girlfriend told him she loved him. He comes in all excited and says, Mommy, Mommy, let me tell you about my day at school. And she says, run and play. I'm busy fixing dinner. I'll talk to you later. Well, all the air goes out of his balloon. He feels deflated. Next day, he comes home from school, and he flunked his math test. He struck out at the ball game. His girlfriend told him she didn't love him anymore. He gets in a fight on the way home. He walks in with big tears rolling down his cheeks. Mother takes one look, drops everything, starts taking care of him. It doesn't take many days like that before he knows what to feel when he gets home from school if he wants mother to pay attention. So we learn what works to get the parents' attention and to get them to try to help. And we, as Val was talking about earlier, we often substitute rackets for other feelings and use a feeling that we know will get what we want in kind of a manipulative way. These are also what the parents paid the most attention to the child for feeling. So the parents usually pay attention to the child when the child is feeling the parent's racket. And that's, kids often get the modeling from parents as well as the stroking for feeling what the parents felt, their rackets. And they were modeled by the parents in a stressful situation.
These are outside of awareness,
That's right.
the substitution and the payoff for the racket.
That's right. Good point.
As an adult, they're outside of awareness.
Yeah, they were things we developed in childhood, but on the adult level, we don't consciously and intentionally often do these things.
Can I ask a question? Because it seems like the pattern, the substitution pattern we learn, you're saying, is in direct response to wanting to get our needs met.
Yes.
And, you know, I just want to check out in a kind of visions context of how we talk about substitution as getting messages about some feelings are okay and others are not, so that we catch that and we attend to ourselves by moving away from that feeling and feeling another feeling. But it's not, my experience of my own substitution was not always about getting the attention from my parents. It was about being able to manage my own, the messages that I'd caught and then unconsciously managing that myself.
Mm-hmm.
So feels like there's a both and in there, and I wanted to check
Right,
that out.
that's true. Good point.
Okay.
And rackets are a little like old shoes. They're kind of worn out, but they're so well known and comfortable that we just hate to give them up. And being a therapist, if any of you, some of you obviously are therapists, you probably experience certain clients come in and every week they're sad and forlorn and so forth, and you don't feel moved by it. When people are in a racket, it's like, here we go again. When people are in natural child feelings, authentic feelings, spontaneous feelings, you feel moved with empathy. And that's one of the ways you can tell when somebody is having a natural feeling versus a racket.
I prefer to use the word familiar than comfortable for rackets. I think it's it's our familiar feeling that we end games with. We
Right.
tend to, and so what do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. you wanted to make a comment.
I wanted to say that Fanita English wrote a lot about rackets, and as a matter of fact, I think she won an Eric Byrne Memorial Award for it. And she always gave the illustration of racket having like the racketeers who have a business like where they're selling cookies, but behind the cookie business, there's really the drug business. And so rackets imply that there's it's hiding something else. So in doing therapy, when you're feeling that it's a racket, as Van was experiencing, and you were kind of getting bored because the feeling doesn't sound authentic, I always ask, what would you be feeling if you weren't feeling sad right now?
Or
To try
underneath.
to uncover what's behind the racket.
Right.
Yeah, but it is just another survival process that we learn to use in order to advance our script and survive. So that's, rackets is one form of that, and games is going to be another one, which we'll talk about next.
And people, again, work hard to justify feeling the way they're feeling. Because it's part of the script and it's part of how they learn to survive.
Would you put numbing of affect in the same
Yes.
category? Okay, thank you.
Any feeling, even happiness, can be a racket. If you think about the Pollyanna script, you know, the little girl who changed the whole village by being happy.
Busy and sick.
I'm busy and sick can be a racket. Almost anything can be used that way. Somebody have a question? Yeah.
Well, what you saying, and I noticed, you know, I'm in therapy, and I noticed when you said about yawning, I noticed if I'm talking, I guess I'm racketing. My therapist is yawning, but then when I get to the core of it, he is really present.
Uh-huh.
I was like, and I didn't know what it was, but I'm like, am I doing something wrong?
Right.
But it was an eye opening when you said that.
Yeah, good. So Bob and Mary Goulding pointed out that all of us are responsible for what we're feeling. We're just simply not aware of how we are producing the feelings we're producing. As a little kid, something happens and we feel a certain way, and so it feels like something out there is making us feel that way. What actually goes on is something happens and we put an interpretation on it. Like I can see you looking at me and think, gosh, she really doesn't like what I'm saying, and feel bad. Or I can think, wow, she's really interested and feel good. What I feel is determined by the interpretation I put on the stimuli that are coming in. And the Gouldings like to look at all the ways that people attempted to justify that they really weren't in charge of what they were feeling. One is the gene theory. I'm an angry man because my father was an angry man. It's in the genes. I inherited it. When in reality, I learned to respond that way to situations by watching him. Another is my horoscope. I'm depressed today because my moon is in the 4th orbit. Some people want to use their biorhythm. You know, it's my lower edge of my biorhythm. Another is other people or other things are making me feel. You're making me angry, or the weather outside is depressing me. When in reality, I'm interpreting what's happening in a certain way. I'm depressed because I wanted to go play tennis and it's raining, or whatever. Another big one that people use is my unconscious makes me feel. You know, Freud said the unconscious is the other 2/3 of the iceberg that you can't get through directly and so forth. And so people can always blame their unconscious for whatever they don't want to take responsibility for. Flip Wilson's favorite phrase used to be, "The devil made me do it." And some people want to blame it on God. It's the Lord's will that I should be suffering this way.